Head a premier research university with almost 40,000 students. The pay, $500,000 a year, plus benefits. That's what David Turpin makes as president of the University of Alberta, according to information released last week on the provincial government's Sunshine List. My next guest says that kind of money isn't uncommon in the world of top executive pay. Jeff Applin is the president of the David Applin Group, a recruiting firm that conducts executive searches. He joins us on the phone from Calgary this morning. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Mark. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Now, I think a lot of us would have a hard time wrapping our heads around a $500,000 annual salary. So what factors into that kind of compensation?
Well, typically when you're looking at executive compensation and a framework for that, there's a few things that determine the level of compensation. One typically is the organizational size by budget and revenue. The second is the organizational size by headcount and number of people. And then the third, which is more subjective, is the mandate. Is it more of a mandate as a leader to initiate transformational change to the organization, or is it more of a maintain kind of mandate?
And what about actual skills? Like what skills would be needed for these executive jobs?
Well, I mean, executive skills typically, obviously leadership ability, communication ability, strategy, overall intelligence. But, fundamentally, one of the biggest differentiators for why executives tend to get paid at a higher level is the ability to deal with stress. It's a high pressure cooker kind of a role, and a lot of people don't have the ability to deal with that constant stress, criticism, competing interests. And so typically stress is a fundamental reason why executives get paid what they do.
Now, the whole discussion was prompted by the release of top Alberta government salaries. So is it fair to compare private and public sector salaries, and is it difficult to make those comparisons?
Well, I mean, it's definitely difficult. And I mean, the Sunshine List in Alberta this year, it's a larger list, and, including the universities and stuff like that. So I think the comparisons are difficult. I think some are more relevant than others. I'll give you an example. I mean, my understanding is that just at the University of Alberta alone, there's well over 1,000 people making six figures according to that list, if I got that correct. So, why that's really important, I honestly don't know. I mean, that's, if you look at any university of the excellent caliber of University of Alberta around the world, that's just what it takes to run an organization like that. So I'm not sure why that's particularly important. I actually think it's a bit of an invasion of privacy. But at the same time, when you're looking at taxpayer dollars, other, agency boards, commissions, for example, I think it's important to bring those salaries out into the open and have more of an executive compensation framework that's scalable and sustainable over time.
Now, is it fair to compare between different jurisdictions? Like, for instance, the top executive of the Workers' Compensation Board makes twice the salary here in Alberta than his counterpart in Ontario.
I think that's relevant to benchmark, across provinces. Again, I would go through that criteria of, what's the size, and obviously I would think, Ontario would be a larger mandate. But it also depends on what the organization needs, right? And that's the conversation that a compensation committee at a board level would have, which is, okay, who's the individual? What's the profile of the individual who could achieve this mandate of leadership for our organization, and what's it going to cost? And in some cases, just the same role but a different province is going to be relevant, and other times it's going to be less relevant because there's more change or a different mandate. Sometimes it's a turnaround or complete change that needs to happen, and other times it's more maintain, which is a little bit easier to do at a lower cost.
I find these Sunshine Lists to be kind of interesting because in some ways, obviously, you want this public accountability. You want there to be the sunshine shining in. But can't they also be inflationary? I mean, people see what certain jobs pay and they go, oh, well, I'm doing that or I'm doing this, right?
Yeah, again, like I said, I mentioned the privacy issue. That is a real issue. Like I said, I think if you're in public service in the executive level of the government, cabinet, and that sort of thing, it's obviously extremely important to be transparent on that. I would suggest that executive levels for agency boards, commissions, and government appointed roles at the executive level are also important to be transparent. But I do question how far does that go, right? I mean, where's the boundary? And like I said, I point to the university professors. I'm really not sure why that's relevant to the general public.
Now, when you talk about people getting up to a really high salaries of $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 per year, are they very common in Alberta?
I guess common. I mean, there's a small proportion of people, overall in the whole, universe of the province. But there's lots of different ways to earn, a six-figure income. Certainly, in sales and those kind of in pay for performance. There's risk attached to those incomes, but if you are successful, a lot of people can make that, whether you're a real estate agent or another salesperson on commission to drive revenue for an organization. And then once you get into the executive ranks, of course, it's more and more common. But, it's funny, you take a step back, and it's funny having this conversation after Canada Day with the, all the sports free agency as well. And,
right.
and a lot of the talk with Steven Stamkos, signing his $68 million contract was that, wow, he could have got probably 80, 90 million if he had gone to, a Toronto or a Buffalo, for example.
Right.
But he took less money at the low price of $68 million to stay in Tampa. So, I mean, it's all relative, Mark. And,
right.
There are, plenty of people that if they're really motivated and willing to pay the price, can earn into the six figures for sure. And then, sky's the limit when you get into entertainment or sports.
For sure. Jeff, it's been enlightening. Thanks for chatting with us this morning.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Jeff Applin is the president of the David Applin Group, a national executive search firm.